Needless to say, my BBC has morphed at least 6 times in the past 3 days, so much of what I've been thinking has been shared. So this is going to be much more coming from what's alive with me right now. So looking over the course of the past 14 years since I've taken my Bhikshuni precepts, I've slowly come to realize that it's all about relationship. That in the beginning, I was totally ignorant of their purpose in my life. I went from total ignorance to quite a bit of confusion as we began to recite them and study them and think about them. Then I kind of morphed into some curiosity. Then I got into some resistance. Then I went back to a little bit more confusion. Then, over the years, a grudging respect as I started to see how my mind was actually changing. And not to say that the confusion and the stubbornness and the resistance are not still there, but over the course of the past 14 years, this growing warmth and appreciation for how they've been able to really set my mind in a direction that I never thought it could go. And the second thing that it has really helped me to understand is the absolute brilliance of the Buddha's mind. His great compassion that was able to hold and navigate this wild humanity that he met when he came to our world to set. His primary goal was teaching the Dharma to all living beings, but primarily to establish the Sangha in our world. It was almost like not only did he turn the wheel of Dharma, but he also turned the wheel of the Sangha. And how that has impacted me over the past 14 years. I want to share a little bit of my process. So first of all, when I requested ordination, Venerable gave me 2 things to do. She said, be very helpful. It was just before a winter retreat. She said, really think about the 3rd and 4th Noble Truth. When I had requested my novice ordination from her, she said, think about the first 2 Noble Truths. But now that you're taking Bhikshuni ordination, there's a certain level of responsibility that you're taking on. And are you really willing to go for liberation? And that for me, the Vinaya was part of true path. That was something that I would have to understand. The second thing she said, it would probably be helpful for you to look at, she pointed me to Abbey Horner's book, The Monastic Discipline, to think about some of the origin stories of the precepts. And I have found that from her direction, that was really helpful to bring these precepts alive, to put a face to some of the people, some of those that met the Dharma, their difficulties and how they came into community, and what transpired over the course of time. And what was very, very helpful is that I have a real proclivity. I learned very well by stories. I've always loved biographies, documentaries. I've always wanted to step back into time and to see what brought people to what happened to them, their environments, their cultures, and how did they work within that? And the origin stories were so helpful for me to get some understanding of what was going on in the minds of the people who felt called to lead the homeless life. Also, too, is that it was really important for me because being raised as a Catholic, as Venerable said the other day, this thou shalt not, I didn't recognize until I started looking at the precepts, the Bhikshuni precepts, how much I was still inculcated with that thinking. And that I wanted to commit myself when I took these precepts that I did not want it to be thou shalt not. That I wanted to see them as a way to protect my mind, to nourish my mind, to transform my mind. Because what happened in my upbringing with the thou shalts is that, well, you're not allowed to do this because you're going to displease this God the Father or make Jesus suffer more. But they never said, well, instead, this is what you do and this is how you do it. You never got a chance to find out exactly what you should be doing instead of thou shalt not. Where with the precepts, you see the whole context. You see all of what was going on and why the Buddha did and said and implemented the way that he did. So then last year and this year, I went back to Abbey Horner, and she has this beautiful introduction on the Vinaya. And she talks about, once again, the brilliance of the Buddha on how this whole thing unfolded. And we've heard a lot this morning, definitely from Venerable Gaoguang, about the undefiled Sangha and how that all started to unpack. But for me and my need for story, it was so helpful for me to understand what was so remarkable about that first 12 years. Now, here's this omniscient Buddha who's going to be a wheel-turning king to establish a Sangha in our world. He certainly couldn't have started with the naughty nuns and the naughty monks. It would not have gone very well. But he had these remarkable people who he had had remarkable karma with have the ripening of those fruits and that life to be able to establish the firm foundation in which the Dharma and establishing the Sangha could be on some solid ground. And that it seems to be such an important piece to this whole story. And that and I never quite bought the, oh, come, oh, bhikkhu, and suddenly they had this thing. I never kind of bought that. But in our Bhikshuni Posada, it unpacks that. And this I can understand. When we have in our Posada, it says, guard your speech well, purify your mind, and avoid all negativities of the body, so that the actions of your three doors are pure. Being able to do all of this is the path of the great sage. That's what come, O bhikkhu, in my mind, what he was saying. Okay, and these were the ones, according to legend, of very little dust in their minds. So the Buddha had some help to begin with. And then as time went on, the dust in the people's minds was a little bit more in there. But they still had this really sincere wish to follow this being who would inspire them and do something to their minds when they heard him speak, that they wanted to go to the home, they wanted to follow him and to embody whatever it was that he had. They wanted whatever he had. So Abbey Horner, in this very astute way that she does, by the way, it's a woman, it's not a man, and that she said there were some complicated issues that the Buddha had to deal with. And these are some of the things that she said that I have found so helpful to understand where their minds were, the laity who joined the Sangha, and that they weren't that much different than me. I have to make contact. I have to make this personal. I have to make their lives have meaning to me to be able to understand what they gave up to do what they did. So one of the things that he was very sensitive from the very, very beginning that the laity were a crucial part of this whole unfolding. She said, for the believing laity, though naturally not in the forefront in the Vinaya, are in a remarkable way never absent, never far distant. They perpetually enter into the life of the order as supporters, critics, donors, intensely interested, and themselves so impacted by the Buddha, deeply invested in the success of the Sangha. So they already had a feeling that what the Buddha was trying to do was very, very important. And they felt the call, they felt the yearning, and that's how they came into the homeless life, that they liked the qualities that he had. And that the Vinaya is not merely to set down guidelines confined to the monastic life within the community, but the Buddha was very clear that he wanted to encourage a certain degree of intercommunication between the lay supporters and this newly forming community, but he would have to define what that meant. Because they're coming out of lay life, they've got not a clue of what they're supposed to be doing differently. And so he wanted to make sure that this dependent relationship with the alms, the food, clothing, shelter, the four requisites that they were being offered in return for what Dharma they understood, that he didn't want them abusing their dependence on the lay supporters, alienating the non-Buddhist laities, but to regulate their lives so as not to cause complaint. So right off the bat, he knew this was going to be a very, very tenuous relationship on how to get them to have monastic minds, to be able to interchange with the laity, and to be able to have them. He had to have this very fine line on what to teach them, what to abandon, what to cultivate, how to get these relationships going. That the interface, not to take advantage of the generosity, to not take advantage of the laity who were taking care of them. Now he says, as in other communities, there were Sangha that were lazy, greedy, monks and nuns who loved luxury, they loved pleasure, they loved to cause disharmony. The Buddha had his hands full. But she kept saying this was the exception, that it is very unmistaken that they were the exception to the rule, and not to think that the Sangha, even in the beginning, was riddled with all sorts of scam artists and abusers and wrongdoing galore. In fact, those 6 naughty nuns and 6 naughty monks, one of the precepts were they kept the Buddha busy. And they came in with whatever intentions they had. The Buddha knew what he was getting. And through the course of the life, he just kept setting down these precepts. Tulananda, she was just the queen of the tribe. She was the queen of the nuns. She was beautiful, and she used it to her advantage. And the Buddha always said, Tulananda, did you do this? Yes, I did. Let's put out a precept. 2 weeks later, Tulananda, and it had to do with men. It had to do with looking beautiful, having to do with, having more things, more beautiful things, wearing perfumes, ornaments, singing, dancing, and so forth. Tulananda, that's kind of our dear sister who set the tone. But the Buddha, also she says, Abhihorna says, now if the order had only contained scrupulous, upright, steadfastly set on liberation monks and nuns, the Pratimoksha probably would not have come into being. Even Venerable Wu Yin says that if there were not for the naughty monks and nuns, we would not have the Pratimoksha. I mean, they kind of set it up so that the naughty monks and nuns 2,500 years later would have some guidance. And the beauty that what I find to be the most remarkable thing about the Buddha was, and as the Venerable Master said this morning, he knew that if this was going to be a living, breathing document, it would have to unfold organically. Abhihorna says that it was never to be suggested from the beginning that he thought over all the possible cases of wrongdoing and depravity of which the monks and nuns might be capable of, and propound a ready-made body of rules to meet every conceivable contingency. There was no way, even if the omniscient mind could have put together those rules, it would have totally blown the whole reason on why this thing was going to be a living, breathing document for not only the Sangha then, but for the Sangha now. So gradually they arose. We know the story on how somebody is naughty, somebody finds out, the lay people tell on them to the Buddha. He brings them before him, says, did you indeed do this? They always say yes. They don't say, not me. They always say yes. And then, of course, the rule gets set down, and hopefully they get it, maybe not. So just remember that the Sangha comes from the laity. And in the beginning, they thought that the behavior that they had as lay people was going to be totally fine. I'm changing my vocation, but I can still matchmake, I can still get married, I can still have sex, I can still have stuff, I can sing, dance, and so forth. They had no idea. So the importance of setting down the precepts as they got clearer about the distinction between what they used to be and what they are now. And the Buddha was so clear to have this beautiful relationship, but yet have the distinction so clear in order that they would be able to inspire the laity, the home life that they had left, that they inspire those, and that they transform their minds. And, we know that there were thousands of Sangha, and a lot of them attained liberation, and they did it through, this is one of the main vehicles in which they did that. And so now 2,500 years later, to be able to subdue our minds, to be able to look at the 3 higher trainings, the 4 noble truths, to see that this is a profound, practical, and very personal journey on how we can really transform ourselves to be worthy of the offerings, the faith. And so I think the brilliance of the Buddha's mind, his great compassion to see the self-created suffering and to give them some sort of framework, some sort of guidance, and his incredible skillful means to be able to keep this going. And so now when I look at the precepts, I think of them. I think of this lineage of laity who have really taken this and actualized the precepts, actualized the Vinaya, and just really appreciating that. And so as I get more older into this, I have much more gratitude, less confusion, less stubbornness and resistance. There's still some laziness in there. I'm working on that. But to really see this as a call for the best that we can be.